This tribute for Sir Cecil Cyrus has been sponsored by New Haven Funeral Home.
A funeral service should be one that you can be proud of, one that leaves lasting memories of your loved ones. And that's where you need the New Haven Funeral Home. When you walk through our doors, our work begins. From corsages to flowers to guest books, whatever you need to make that funeral a memorable one. We are proud of the quality and class we have brought to the industry. We are proud for having trained the very first certified embalmers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are proud of leading the way in terms of live streaming of funerals online so that your family members overseas could also be part of the celebration of life. We are constantly improving our services. We are driven by customer satisfaction, and we are proud of all that we do.
New Haven Funeral Home, helping families preserve memories.
Good day, everyone. We invite you to join us in honoring the life of Sir Arthur Cecil Cyrus. He was a remarkable individual who excelled in multiple fields, including medicine, surgery, gardening, athletics, research, and teaching. Above all, he was a devoted family man.
My name is Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Cecil Cyrus, medical practitioner, extraordinary, a patriot, man of many, many parts, was of heroic proportions. I know that people use the word to describe him as legend or iconic. To my mind, those words don't properly encapsulate the life and work of Dr. Cecil Cyrus. I say he was of heroic proportions. That is to say, he made such an extraordinary contribution to the development of this country, to its people, that contribution transformed people's lives. In this case, particularly in the delivery of medical services. Indeed, if someone were to write about the life of Cecil Cyrus, Sir Cecil, and you didn't know him in flesh, you would say that, no, this is a fiction. There's no way one human being could have accomplished so much in his 94 years of living on God's earth. He's a young man from Leyu, a town but rural St. Vincent and the Grenadines. His father was a master tailor. Cecil Cyrus got a place at the grammar school. Remember the grammar school in those days, only few boys outside of the planter merchant elite would have entered the school. He was a brilliant all-round student and was determined to be a medical doctor because of what he saw growing up in Leyu and in Kingstown. This desire drove him to study on scholarship at Queen's University in Belfast, where he graduated in 1957 as a medical doctor. But he was not satisfied only with the general medical training of a bachelor's in medicine and bachelor's in surgery. Cecil Cyrus did a lot of other formal studies in the medical sciences. For instance, he did postgraduate work in obstetrics. He did work, postgraduate work in ophthalmology to address matters of your eyes. And of course, he did a double fellowship, the Royal College of Surgeons in Edinburgh and in London. Prepared himself extremely well to return to colonial St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Immediately, he made an impact at the hospital with his love for people, his discipline, his professional skills of the highest quality. Look, as a medical practitioner over the years, he was an orthopedic surgeon, that's to say, dealing with bones. He was in obstetrics and gynecology. He was in family medicine. He dealt with old people, with children and pediatrics. He was in general surgery. He did eye surgery. He did skin grafts. This man, this heroic figure, was simply out of this world. And in addition to all of this work in the public sector, at the hospital, and then he established his own hospital where he was phenomenal. I know about his work because I used to take my father to see Dr. Cyrus. And he was always very kind, very disciplined, very organized. But it was not only in medicine that he did extraordinary work. He single-handedly established squash in this country from 1966. His family, they were all into squash, his children. He built squash courts at what was the Cecil Cyrus complex, which the National Lottery bought. And the National Lottery still has squash courts there at the headquarters of the National Lottery. He was a horticulturalist. He had very good hands for growing things. And throughout all of this, very, very humble. You put him in charge of something, he's going to get it done. He didn't have time for people who did a lot of talking and not doing things. So naturally, along the way, some people didn't understand him. But very often, ordinary mortals don't understand this kind of a genius, this kind of a phenomenal, extraordinary, heroic personality who lived among us. We will appreciate him more in death than in life. That often happens, and he doesn't need any memorials in stone. He's in the hearts and minds of thousands of Vincentians. But not only did he do his work now, he did research for posterity. He published several books. One of them, the title, and I have the title written down here, Clinical and Pathological Atlas, The Records of a Surgeon in St. Vincent, the West Indies. I have a copy of this atlas, and I've gone through it, but you can only grasp the magnitude of that work if you are truly deeply initiated in the medical sciences. And it has been hailed as a fantastic piece of research work where graduate students in medicine and in surgery, that they study this atlas. He wrote his autobiography. He wrote a book also called Dr. Grandad, which is a lot of humor. That's how he treated his little children. So he has left us a rich legacy of writings in his professional field. These are just some of his work. He has many professional articles in peer-reviewed journals. He was a much sought-after speaker and a deliverer of lectures all over the Caribbean and indeed globally. The truth is this, is that if you want to be objective, from the time this country was founded as modern St. Vincent and the Grenadines, if you go back to colonial times from 1763, you're not going to meet anybody who can compare with Cecil Cyrus as a medical practitioner, many-sided surgeon, specialist in so many different fields. When I came to office in 2001, one of the first persons who came to see me was Cecil Cyrus. You know, you come in as prime minister, everybody wants to give you advice. And he came to me to advise me about some things on what to do at the hospital and the medical services. And I'll never forget, he said at the hospital, the first thing you must do is to recruit a consultant ophthalmologist. He said there are a lot of people with eye problems in this country, they're not being dealt with. And this is hampering their lives, their living, and the economy, how they interact with people. They can't read properly because their eyesight is problematic. And he said these things are curable, most of them. So, you know, he was very enthused when Fidel and Chavez launched this eye program in which St. Vincent and the Grenadines was involved, and where we had over 3,000 persons which received treatment in Cuba and here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines under that program to improve their eyesight. He was full of humor. I mean, anytime I sat down with him, I learned so much. And you would learn it with humor and with beautiful English language. I remember one day he came here by the office of the Prime Minister. As soon as he sat down, he took out a mint from his pocket. He said, you know, this is the hour when I need to eat my mint. Because he had certain schedules when he did certain things. And he said, I want to use your bathroom where it is. So he went, used it, came back out. He said, well, when I come to town, I have two places where I use the bathroom. This one is the third one that I will make use of on an ongoing basis. I said, that's fine. Come anytime. And then he said to me, he said, you know, Ralph, if you live long enough as a man, you'll either die from or die with a prostate problem. I said, I didn't know that. He said, and you know that God is a woman, as he explained that to me. He said, well, in compensation for giving men this permanent problem, she, God, gave women the transient matter of hot flushes. He says, quite unfair. But then God is a woman. And then he paused and said, do you know that there are two animals known to civilization, only two that have a prostate problem? Man and dog. And then he paused further and said, yes, that's why women with much justification say that men are dogs. Now, that was the nature of his humor. He was a patriot to the core. He loved this country. And it was painful to see that on many occasions, he suffered for this love of his country. Indeed, Cecil Cyrus, given his skills, his abilities, would have been an extremely rich man if he had gone to work any other place. But he wanted to be among his people. He was, in his time, one of the leading surgeons and medical specialists in the Caribbean and in the hemisphere. I don't think people fully appreciate the high quality of this man. He was honest to the core. He loved sports, cricket, squash. He's not one who was given into fads. For example, he was very strong on the science, as he saw it, that there should be no attempt to provide any legalization or decriminalization for marijuana. He didn't think that person should have been jailed for long periods of time or jailed at all. But he felt that there should have been programs of education and to depenalize where there were small quantities. But he was very strong that marijuana was not good for people. Whether you agree with him or not, it didn't matter him. He stated his position from his own scientific perspective. Now, this view may not be a popular one, but he articulated it openly and in his writings. And then he was a tremendous friend, loyal friend. He was a wonderful husband. His widow, Lady Catherine, whom he met when he was at medical school, she was his life partner in everything, including her qualities as a nurse and as an organizer and a supporter, and there to help him and lift him up. His children, his grandchildren, whom he loved very much. He was a splendid father, devoted father. Oh, and he was like many grandfathers in our civilization. He doted on his grandchildren. This country is going to miss Cecil Cyrus. In fact, we started to miss him in his retirement years, and we'll miss him evermore. We need to pay proper tribute to this man, to this person of heroic proportions. On behalf of the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, on my own behalf, and of Eloise, who loved him very much, I express sincerest condolences to his widow, Catherine, to his children, to his grandchildren, to his immediate family and friends. May he rest in peace.
Every morning you greet me, small and white, keen and bright. You look happy to meet me.
When Dr. Cyrus moved into this road, which is the Government House Road, we were living here. My mother was here at the time, and of course she would have known Dr. Cyrus's father. So Dr. Cyrus quickly established the relationship between himself and my mother. And of course, I was here with my mother. And that relationship continued until his passing. I visited Dr. Cyrus on his birthday, and we had a good chat. I spent some time with his family. But Dr. Cyrus, when he came back to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, lived at Coxseat. He was not living here when he came back initially. He lived at Coxseat, and my first encounter with him was when I took a friend of mine who was ill up to Coxseat, and it was in the night. And Dr. Cyrus had just come back from all day working at the hospital. And he saw my friend, gave me some instructions, and I took him straight back down to the hospital. And from that, I met him occasionally outside of the family relationship. The first time I heard Dr. Cyrus speak to an audience was at a Rotary meeting not too long after he came back and practicing at the hospital. We were out at Crow's Nest when he addressed the Rotary. And I never forget one of the stories he told. There was a guy who fell off of a tree in Barley. And he fell into a lime tree from the higher tree that he was climbing. And the lime tree pierced him straight through his body and came out at his neck. And he was brought to the hospital. Dr. Cyrus operated on him. And you know, a lime tree, you have a lot of cashy and so on and so forth, but it protruded from his neck, went in through his stomach, I think. And he said the guy survived after the operation. But he said one thing, which never left me. He said he never gave himself any credit. He said, this guy is alive because of the grace of God. That's what Dr. Cyrus said. I repeated that story to him. And, well, not for him to hear because he's the one who said it, but for his family who was at his bedside when I visited. I repeated that story. I remembered it quite well. But Dr. Cyrus was also, in addition to being a surgeon at the hospital, and people call him Dr. Cyrus. Really, his right title should be Mr. Cyrus, because he has a FRCS. And he like my mother. She likes flowers. He likes flowers, but he also likes to plant vegetables and so on. And every time he reaps, he would come up here and bring part of his produce for my mother. And so that relationship continued until Dr. Cyrus died. If he, in his older years, if he couldn't come, he would send it by his gardener. Whatever he reaps from his kitchen garden, nice lettuce and things of that nature. And we continued to enjoy that relationship. At the Governor General's residence every year, I made sure I sat at the table with him when we were raising funds for the Governor General's pet project with children. I was the auctioneer at those meetings, and then I will take my seat at the Cyrus's table. We were chat. And when I came back to St. Vincent and the Grenadines from my stint in Barbados at the Caribbean Congress of Labour, I became a member of Parliament, as a senator under the previous St. Vincent and the Grenadines Labour Party. And it was during that period that Dr. Cyrus was doing all his work on the squash complex, which now it's still the same place, but at the time he was the initiator. And he came to see me in the office. I was acting for the Minister of Communication and Works, Arthur Williams, who had gone to a meeting in a Commonwealth meeting, I think in Kenya. And he told me about this project, Squash Complex, and he, of course, almost single-handedly was spending his own money and so on, and doing what he was doing to make this Squash Complex a reality. But he needed some aggregate, stones and so on and so forth, and wanted to know whether or not we could assist. So, of course, I spoke with the Prime Minister. As a matter of fact, when I spoke to him, I was in the company of the Honorable Hudson Tanis at the time. And they said, listen, provide him with the stones and so on. So I gave instructions to the permanent secretary to send some aggregate from the belay crusher to the Squash Complex. And so I made a little assistance in that. I think it's the first time I'm speaking about it now, that Dr. Cyrus had died. But we maintained that close relationship all throughout the years. He was here when my mother celebrated her 101 birthday. He couldn't miss it. Came to register his presence. And the relationship was very good between Dr. Cyrus and myself. And anyway I see him, I would make sure once he's not busy, we're going to have a little conversation. So he was my neighbor, or I was his neighbor, for a number of years. And that relationship stayed on. Some years ago, they broke into to his place over there and so on. So I had to show some measure of concern because I'm living in the same neighborhood. So he's a good man, very good man, Dr. Cyrus. I'll give you another story. Yes, one of the stories I want to relate, and that both Dr. Cyrus and the guy who was involved is my friend. When Dr. Cyrus opened his clinic, he enclosed the clinic area, which adjoins his part of his property. And this guy broke through with his vehicle, and it went over into Dr. Cyrus's property. Dr. Cyrus was in the pool, and the guy quickly called a tow truck to pull his car back out. So the guys had to go in and tie up, and Dr. Cyrus was looking at him. So he said, young man, you're all trespassing on my property. So the fellow was shocked to see Dr. Cyrus. He said, come here. So the fellow said, oh, Doc, I had some intention of telling me when you're moving out the vehicle, it broke down my fence. And he said, who are you? So the fellow explained who he was, who his family was, who his parents and so on. And he said, but you come from good stock, but you're a scamp. He said, anyhow, come and let me examine you, because you went over the place in the car. And he told me that Dr. Cyrus examined him, stretch his hands, his legs, check him out and so on and so forth. And gave him a letter and said, well, you carry this letter now to the police. So the guy took it and did as Dr. Cyrus said. He didn't call the police. He said he wrote about the attack and said, you carry it to the police. And he did that. And I think up to Dr. Cyrus's death, um, they became good friends, very good friends. The type of man he is, you know. He's a caring man because even though his property was damaged, he's looking out for the welfare of the driver who went over with his vehicle. I asked him if he was okay and feeling any pain and so on and so forth. And that's the nature of the man. That's the nature of Dr. Cyrus. A good man, very good man. And of course, I express my own sympathies to his family and wish that they will carry on in his tradition, caring for the people around them. We'll miss him.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights.
I am Dr. Daniel Garraway. I am an obstetrician and gynecologist, and I'm the medical director of the Maryfield Hospital. First of all, let me express my condolences to Lady Catherine Cyrus and the Cyrus family. I know that we have lost a giant, and I know for you, you have lost a great man as well. I first met Dr. Cyrus sometime in the mid-1960s, maybe around 1965, when I went to him for a medical disorder. I received an appointment card, and the appointment card read, Mr. Cecil Cyrus, BSc, MB, BAO, FRCS London, FRCS Edinburgh. It read DOBST, RCOG, and it also read DO. So I went home and I researched what these things may mean. I realized then that I was in the presence of a great man. Some years later, I went to Dr. Cyrus's office for an insurance medical. This was around 1971. In the process of examining me, Dr. Cyrus asked me who I was and what I planned to do. I said I was a teacher, but that I wanted to be a doctor. He says to me, I will be in the hospital on Monday in the operating theater at 8 o'clock. Come and see what I'm doing. So I got all scrubbed and cleaned, and I arrived at the Kingstown General Hospital at 7 o'clock. He said, come for 8, but I made sure I was there. At 7:30, he flipped past me, and I followed him into a room. He changed, and I changed too, and I told him who I was. He went into the operating room, and I went. He began to scrub, and I began to scrub. He turned to me and says, do you know how to scrub? I said, no, sir. Sister, teach him to scrub. When I was finished scrubbing, he had finished his first case. It was then and there that I realized that there was a certain twinning of this great man's soul to my lowly form. And so I went with him on his ward rounds and to his outpatient department. I went on to Cave Hill in that year and was admitted to medical school in 1972. I had won a scholarship to read for a degree in medicine funded by CEDA for 5 years, which scholarship was withdrawn for reasons I will not discuss now. In the summer of 72, having been admitted to medical school, I had no financial means to get there. Dr. Cyrus said to me, "What is the first step?" I said, "I have to pay the University of the West Indies X amount of money, after which they'll send me a ticket to get to Mona. So where are you going to live when you get there? I don't know. What are you going to eat when you get there? I don't know." He said to me, "Come to my house." I went to his house that afternoon. He came and he gave me in cash the money I needed to make my first payment to enter medical school at the University of the West Indies in Mona, Jamaica. No questions asked. A few days later, I got a call from Service Commissions that I was awarded another scholarship funded by the British government. I was to travel on a Monday, and this information came through on a Friday, like today. I went to Service Commissions. They said, "You must sign a bond, and you must get 2 sureties." Being from the rural village of Rose Hall and being in Kingstown, where I knew very few persons, I hastened to Dr. Cyrus and I said, "Please sign my bond. How much will they ask me to pay?" He said, if you don't come back." I said, $10,000. He took up his pen and he signed it. And on Monday morning, I hastened off to the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. This was just the beginning of an amazing journey. Each time I came to St. Vincent, the first person I visited was Dr. Cyrus. I would call before I leave Mona or send a telegram. "I'm coming home for a weekend or for a day or whatever it was. Can I come to the ward room with you, please?" By now, he had opened the Botanic Hospital in Montrose. And he would say to me, "Whenever you see a case, get a book and write down the diagnosis and the initial of the patient. And when you go home, you study it up. If you do that, you will be amazed at how far it will take you. People will be surprised at how much you will learn." I worked with Dr. Cyrus at the Botanic Hospital, but it will be remiss of me not to tell you that Mrs. Cyrus was just as kind, helpful, and an amazing teacher. My first appendectomy, which he took me through, I had my head buried down into the wound. And I could not tie a single knot. Mr. Cyrus says to me, "Take your head out of the wound. Dr. Cyrus does not like it when you have your head in the wound." "Yes, Mr. Cyrus." Daniel, just tie an ordinary knot like when you tie your shoelace. Yes, Mrs. Cyrus. And so the appendectomy was completed. I spent many days in his amazing museum. He sent me to work. In order to study in the museum, I did a little bit of cleaning, a little bit of organization, organized the specimen, and by doing that, I learned enough for a lifetime. When I was leaving to go back to Jamaica after a short holiday in 1972 or 73, he gave me a little book, and it was called A Medley of Thoughts. I must have read that book about 1,000 times. But the amazing thing is that he signed it and said, with many thanks. I wonder what he thanked me for. I know what I have to thank him for because I know how much I learned in the time I spent with him. The things I learned from Dr. Cyrus to this day still reach out and save 1,000 lives. He taught me things I've never learned anywhere else. Simple, seemingly simple methods of closing an abdomen safely. I learned from him. I learned such nowhere else. I think that what he taught me most was that being a doctor, being a surgeon, is not just about cutting and stitching efficiently, effectively. When a patient places his or her life into your hands as a surgeon or physician, it means that they trust you fully. The welfare of their family and the extended family depend upon your actions. And I think that Dr. Cyrus was ever conscious of that fact. And so Hippocrates is said to have told us, first, do no harm. But I think Dr. Cyrus had the proper interpretation of what Hippocrates said, because Hippocrates really did not say, first, do no harm. Hippocrates said, you must bring the full force of your training, your skill, and your education to bear and provide the best care you can for your patient, and thereafter fear no harm. Dr. Cyrus was competent, professional, capable, excellent, organized. When adversity struck or strikes, that is when the strength of this great surgeon, this great doctor, came to bear. And it helped us to understand that learning, the thing that he did was to teach. he helped me to understand that learning is hard. It does not come easy. Learning is hard. And sometimes it's even in our deep sleep that wisdom comes to us. And as he would often say, it comes to us through the awful grace of God. As a man, his spirit was indomitable. I think it would be quite fitting to just quote briefly from one of my favorite poets. Because I think it tells the whole story of this man. When dark is the night from pole to pole, I trust in my indomitable soul. He was a man of amazing competence, and I think he would like to leave a few thoughts for the next generation. First, he will tell the next generation that in intellectual matters, we must think only of the facts and the truth which the facts bear out. I think he would want the next generation to avoid making decisions only upon what they believe, or making decisions based upon how beneficial they think that belief might be to society, and to consider the facts and the truths which the facts bear out. I think you will want the next generation to understand that we all have to live on this planet. People will say things that we do not like. People will do things that we do not like. But there is a remedy for that. It's called tolerance, because love is better than hate, and calm is better than strife. In the end, we will all have to live, especially on a small island, learn to live together, or we will all die together. And so, I say goodbye to my friend, this indomitable soul. I know that he still stands upon the breezy hill, that breezy hill that skirts the down. I know he will crave the grassy turf, and I know he will crave the evening sun that may shine upon his grave.
This tribute for Sir Cecil Cyrus has been sponsored by New Haven Funeral Home.
A funeral service should be one that you can be proud of, one that leaves lasting memories of your loved ones. And that's where you need the New Haven Funeral Home. When you walk through our doors, our work begins. From corsages to flowers to guest books, whatever you need to make that funeral a memorable one. We are proud of the quality and class we have brought to the industry. We are proud for having trained the very first certified embalmers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are proud of leading the way in terms of live streaming of funerals online so that your family members overseas could also be part of the celebration of life. We are constantly improving our services. We are driven by customer satisfaction, and we are proud of all that we do.
New Haven Funeral Home, helping families preserve memories.
I felt a warmth right from the start. Then one day he took you away. Why did it happen? Who can say? Now all that there is left for me is just a precious memory.
I'm Dr. Rosalind Ambrose. I am a radiologist, a medical specialist in medical imaging, where I do body scans and interpret x-rays and scan examinations for diagnostics in patients with particular complaints. I qualified and returned to St. Vincent as a specialist in the January of 1993. And I've been working at the Milton Cater Memorial Hospital from that time to today. I've known Dr. Cyrus. I knew about him when I was much younger, before I became a physician, because my mother went to school with him as a child. They were in primary school together. And so when he returned to St. Vincent in the 1960s, she'd speak very favorably about him and about times they had as children in primary school, their encounters, and that he'd gone to England and had done so well in becoming a surgeon. He had then returned to St. Vincent, and I remember there was a little girl with very marked bow legs living on Back Street. And he had done some reconstructive surgery, and she no longer had bow legs. And that was one of the big fascinations, that he had done this wonderful job of helping her to feel more confident about herself, because she no longer had this deformity, which used to make her feel a bit on the shy side. So from those days through my medical school, excuse me, and through my qualification, I did, in fact, he was admirable from all of those days for as long as I've known about him. When I returned here, he did, in fact, embrace me in medicine. We exchanged a lot of ideas, and I invited him to the newer things in radiology, which was really the whole issue of body scanning, CT and ultrasound, and he was very fascinated by that. He embraced what is like a forever learning. He always felt there was something new to know, and that I felt was very encouraging, which is a principle that I myself ended up embracing, that you always try to find and learn something that was new. He would invite me to see some of the things that he had done before he had even established a museum. It showed me a lot of his specimens, and we discussed many things about them, and some were just fascinations that you would have seen in a medical textbook. And to see them in real life was an absolute fascination for me. But I think that it's unfortunate that a number of our newer physicians would have missed that experience of interacting with him, because he was always willing to teach something, show something, and that I find was very encouraging. I always had looked to him as a senior physician that I can call upon, and we'd exchange views about certain medical conditions and discuss cases, always cases of interest, and he was always quite keen to know and embrace our conversations about things that we're seeing in medicine. He had said to me one time that this hospital is, in this country, is like a gold mine of things that you would see, you may read in the textbook, but you never find that they really do exist in real life. And that curiosity about things in medicine was one of the aspects of the inspiration of talking to him and working with him for a very short time. I'd see him at his hospital, at the Botanic Hospital, because when I came back, he had already left the General Hospital and was established in the Botanic Hospital. Yeah, he will be surely missed. He loved medicine, he loved his gardening, and he would often bring fruits and so for us at the X-ray department, and also here at the Imaging Center from the time I've started. He has wax apples that he grew in his garden, and he was always willing to share those with us. At X-ray department, he would bring, every Christmas, he would bring us a bottle of wine and a cake or tin of cookies or something. He'd always come and exchange things with us at the department. Always a feeling of goodwill was always with him, and we really appreciate that. He'll be surely missed in a number of ways for a number of reasons, but I'm sure he's in a better place, and we will keep him favorably in our hearts and in our minds. And we say, may he rest in peace.
I am Rene Batiste. Today I pay tribute to Cecil Cyrus. How did I know Cecil? How did I come to know of his achievements, his contribution, and his outstanding works as a national? Cecil was a patriot. Some would say even a hero. I learned about him and I was introduced to him by my mother, the late Bear Batiste. She spoke about his days at the Kingstown Anglican School. She said that she knew him around that time. And even then, he was so far beyond the scholarship expected of a student of his time. And she told us about his exploits from time to time in the United Kingdom that you learned about. I, of course, learned about his exploits here at the Kingstown General Hospital, as it was then known, and read his books. It is a very rare thing for us to have academics who write extensively. I can name two, Sir Cecil and Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, books that are published by internationally renowned publishers and that are worthy of someone of their stature. I also discovered his museum that he started of the pathology when he did the various surgeries. It was not known. He was just simply beyond his time. He didn't just do medicine. He did research. He collected specimens. He did excellent work in relation to those specimens across a broad spectrum of what a surgeon would find in this excellent body we call the human body. I recalled when we had an exhibition at the Carnegie Public Library on the top floor so that people can see what these various specimens look like, what they represent, what the pathology was all about. One little girl who helped him to label those specimens is now today also a doctor herself, Dr. Gabriella Ambrose. He said it was the first young person he met who was not afraid of the specimens, and he thought that it was so natural for her. Speaking about him in another sense, I was also a patient. At the time, I had injured my right knee and I was in tremendous pain. And he was on vacation and he promised as soon as he gets home, he will take a look. He did take a look. I had to be hospitalized. And you know, when you are in competent hands and safe hands, the healing process, your mind just gets about doing the job of healing. And he told me, if you take off this cast before the recommended time, 5 years later, you will have to do knee replacement. It was almost 5 years later to the very date that I had to do knee replacement. But he helped me tremendously so that I could have done the work that I set myself to do as a representative and as a minister of government. There was another place where we worked together. His dear wife, Lady Catherine, was a seroptomist, is still a seroptomist. And she served in every capacity in the Seroptomists International of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and indeed in the Seroptomists International Caribbean Network. She was just recently honored as one of 100 seroptomists in the Federation of Great Britain and Ireland, under which the Caribbean seroptomists fall under that umbrella. And she was like my nurse at the time. But the work that she did was outstanding. And he was such a, we call him seroptomist, because he was always there. He gave her a helping hand, he participated, and he would at times be like the consoling uncle that you can speak to when you're doing this voluntary work. And he was always by her side. When we took over the ground floor at our headquarters where the center is, the Helping Hand Center, he set himself the task of keeping that garden in pristine condition. The fences always trimmed, the flowers always blooming and looking fresh as ever. That was his work. He dedicated and found time to do that. That was not all that he did. We know of his exploits in squash. This man, this Vincentian, this patriot, he thought about this game and having it spread in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Can you name me one other Vincentian who could step into his shoes? A busy doctor, the single surgeon in a hospital, a husband, a father, an author, a researcher, and he found time to do that. These days, when you ask people to do something, there are two excuses. I have a family, and I just can't find the time. I'm so busy with my work. Those are the two primary things at the top of the list. He always found the time. You see, he was an excellent person in that regard. He knew how to manage his time. All of us have the same amount of time, 24 hours a day. At home, he had his garden going, his vegetable garden. Every now and then he will send heads of lettuce for my sister, and he would remember some for Rennie. Plum roses, plums, he would remember. Don't forget, give Rennie some plums. Give her some of the lettuce or whatever he has growing in the backyard. When you go there sometimes, when we had our meetings and we go there, you'd see him very busy by the riverside. When we have extraordinary rains and floods and the yard gets flooded, he's there looking after it. Just simply, where did he find the time and the energy? As we always talking about the body, the human body and the human brain, you see, this is a creation with boundaries unknown, and we haven't yet exploited, we haven't yet explored either the boundaries of this human specimen. It was a joy to speak with him because the philosophy that he's so grounded in, this philosophy, and he was a man walking briskly and walking humbly. His elbows were never out in the road like a traffic sign. Never with his elbows out there, but walking simply, briskly, and with a very direct gaze when he's speaking to you. What a contribution he has made in this country. How many lives he saved against tremendous odds. When you read his works, it makes you think and think deeply. It is what you would say, soul searching. He found the radiological sciences fascinating, and that if he were younger, he would have tackled some of the aspects leading up to teleradiology and all these other disciplines, these additional disciplines, and the evolution in the imaging sciences. But I think St. Vincent and the Grenadines has lost a tremendous asset. He had stopped practicing, wasn't active in practice anymore. He had even closed the lab, the pathology museum, and he was no longer active because he was older, couldn't play squash anymore. But his interest was always there in so many things. He was always available to give a wise word, sometimes a word you were not prepared to hear from a close relative or a close friend. But here he was, this giant of a man, telling you frankly, squarely, and in language that you can understand. And he expects you to comprehend as well. And you felt this great obligation to accept it. But you may have been told the same thing by a relative, a lawyer, or a priest. And you're wondering if they were right. And then here comes Dr. Cyrus, as most people would call him, telling you this is it, and very straightforward. No frills, no fear. Just what he knows that you must hear, and what action you must take, what direction you ought to pursue. And he would be at pains to explain why he's giving you that direction, why he's proffering this advice. He's a great soul, so well grounded in many, many, many disciplines. You would not believe that this man that walked among us is one of the surgeons who's listed to look after Her Majesty the Queen, now deceased. Could you imagine some individuals here of much less renown and recognition having that accolade? But here he was, just briskly going about his business. And that's the picture I have of him always. Even when lately he would be sitting in a chair and so on and being quiet. The image is the image of the man with his brow slightly furrowed, but his gaze firmly into your eyes, and his lips firm and telling you what you need to hear. We will miss him in the Sir Optimist Club. He was always there, always at his wife's side, always supporting her, whether she's president, vice president, or secretary, or just simply a member in a committee working for the sake of the women and girls of this country and this our Caribbean. We will miss him. We would miss him. But God put him for a special purpose, and I'm satisfied that he has served that tremendous purpose in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the region, and the world. He has left his word and his work in writing for generations to come. Please go to the public library, find his books, read them. Better still, you may contact his editors and publishers and purchase a copy of any one of his books. It will be worth your while. It's a treasure far more valuable than gold. So Cecil, rest in peace.
Small and white, clean and bright, you look happy to meet me. Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow, bloom and grow.
I got to know Sir Arthur in 1965 when I became a student nurse at the General Hospital, as it was called then. Sir Arthur was a consultant surgeon, and he was an FRCS, a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons. And because of that, he was called Mr. Cyrus instead of Doctor, but most of his patients called him Dr. Cyrus. He was a very professional man in all of his dealings. He respected all of the workers at the hospital. He always said that we all made up a team. It does not matter what level of work one was doing. It was important for the betterment of this patient. His patients were always number one. It didn't matter if that patient had on a leather shoe or a flip-flop. The patient mattered to him. Mr. Cyrus always used to have his ward rounds on his clinic days, especially his clinic days were Tuesdays and Fridays, and he made ward rounds on those days. When he comes to the ward, it was always with a lot of medical students. And his Tuesdays were his teaching days. It didn't matter if you were the most junior student nurse, we all gathered for his teaching. It meant a lot to us. He taught about the patient who was in the ward. He was always respectful, and he just ensured that the patient was comfortable. And then he taught us. He encouraged us as students to ask questions. He always said there was never a stupid question. Ask any question you wanted to ask pertaining to the patient, and he answered it. And he also gave us a lot of self-confidence, because he said, when you're speaking to me, if he asked you a question, he said, look me in the eye, look at me. I only have one head just like you. Never be afraid. You know, there were consultants and there were doctors and we were junior nurses, so we were always timid to ask them questions. But Mr. Cyrus always said, ask. It does not matter what you want to ask about the patient, ask. Patient care was number one to Mr. Cyrus. He ensured that his patients were well hydrated. He said that when he came to the wards, he always wanted to know the vital signs for the patient. And his vital signs were not only temperature, pulse, and respiration. You had to tell him the patient's intake and the output. And when you talk about the output, I mean urine and stool. And he wanted to know the quantity and the quality, the color of the urine, the consistency of the stool. And each nurse, as I said, it does not matter how junior you were, you had to know about your patient. And the most important thing is when you tell him about the patient, then he will say, may I see the chart? Because if you were to say that the temperature is normal, he wanted to look at the chart. Mr. Cyrus was such a professional, and I shall always remember him. Even when we were not at work, we will ask for a day off on ward round days, and his ward round days were Tuesdays, and his teaching days, as I said, were Tuesdays. He made ward rounds on Tuesdays and Fridays, and he taught especially on Tuesdays. And we would ask for a day off on Tuesdays if we did not work on that ward, and then we'll ask the sister in charge to give us permission to come to his ward rounds. And those days we look forward to ward rounds because we learned a lot. Mr. Cyrus was knighted by us on the ward. We used to call him Sir Cy. Well, you don't call people by their first name. So we used to say Cy, Sir Cy, and the Cy was for Cyrus. Even before he was knighted, he was so important to us that we called him Sir Cy. Not to his face, actually, but he knew we called him so. Because I remember at one time, he called me and he said, do you know who is speaking? And I said, no, I'm sorry, I do not know. He said to me, Sir Cy. And I really had to laugh because he knew we used to call him Sir Cy. Overall, St. Vincent has lost a professional, a Vincentian man of the soil. The medical profession has lost a very professional man. The sporting community has lost a sportsman because Mr. Cyrus also loves squash. On behalf of my family and myself, I wish to express our deepest condolences to Lady Catherine, his widow, Paul, Mark, Helen, and Rachel, his children, and their families, to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and to all his friends and families. We have lost an extremely, extremely brilliant professional man. And I've always said that Mrs. Cyrus has made me the nurse that I became or that I am, because he really took interest in his patients and he encouraged us to take interest in our patients. All of our lives as nurses, we were patient-centered. We had to take excellent care of our patients. And so I shall always remember him. And I have always said that I shall give him his laurels. And so every birthday, I used to call him and wish him the best and let him know how important he was to me as a nurse and to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We shall always miss him and think about him.
My name is Andy Roche, and I worked in the nursing service from 1972, then in other parts of the health service, and retired in 1985. Now, when I entered nursing in 1972, we went to the classroom. In those days, it was PTS, 6 months in the classroom as preliminary training students with very little clinical experience. Of course, while we're in the classroom, we would have heard about the who is who in health. And Mr. Cecil Cyrus was mentioned. He was a consultant surgeon. And we got the impression we had to respect him and we had to fear him a little. So 6 months later, when I entered the ward area, I met Mr. Cyrus. I could sum him up as being an exemplary doctor, an excellent surgeon. He was a good teacher. He was a stickler for standards. He was very compassionate. He had a sharp wit that sometimes if you don't really understand them, you probably will get offended. And I could give testimony to those things. After the 6 months in the classroom, I was sent to the ward area, female surgical ward, on night duty. Now we changed uniform from the white dresses to the blue calico, with the aprons that crossed in the back. So you kind of presented as if you were a nurse with experience. On my first night, after I took over the wards, and I went to the office to check the case notes and to get ready for what I had to do tonight, Mr. Cyrus stepped into the office. He said, "Good night." And he said, "Nurse, I've come to see the patient for cataract in the morning." I said a little prayer, and then I looked up at him and I said, "Sir, I don't know who is the patient." He said, "Can I speak to the charge nurse?" I looked at him and I said, "Sir, I am the charge nurse." He said, "And you don't know who are the patients?" I said, "Sir, it's my first night here. It's the first I'm doing night duty. I've just come from the classroom." He said, "Oh, okay, come. Let's go through the case notes." And he sat there with me and he went through the case notes. He identified the patient. He gave me the list of expectations for the night. He mentioned the other patients for surgery the next day, and he told me to continue to do what he had just showed me to do for the patients, and he said good night, and he left. And to me, that was not the man that I should have feared as I was told. And my spirit warmed to him. I met him on several occasions during rotation on the ward areas. But then in the second year, I was assigned to the operating theater. And it was a time when we were going through, that is the hospital, some serious changes with respect to surgery. Hitherto, all the instruments were boiled in large autoclaves, and the nurses would set up for each surgical procedure just before it, and then the surgery would take place. But at this particular time, Sister Pauline Charles had returned from Jamaica, being the first Vincentian nurse to have acquired advanced training in operating theater techniques. She had come back and she had changed the entire operating theater. Surgeries were classified as major and minor. Equipment was identified for each particular surgery. Cardiac system was set up so that persons who were preparing these trays knew what to put in them. A lot of resources were obtained at that time. Trays were prepared, and a new system of sterilization was introduced. The packets had in them a small dial called a diac, which when they were sterilized, we will pull it out the packet before opening it. And if the diac was not green, we knew that the packet was not sterilized and discarded it. And with all of that came, for the first time, a Central Sterile Supply Department, a CSSD, that had to prepare all these things. Along with that came job descriptions. They were there before, but they were refined now as to who would do what. Now, Mr. Cyrus loved his music. So he played the Tchaikovsky, the Bach, the whatever, and the theater was really calm and serene, and people were assigned duties. The setup nurse would set up the trolley, the scrub nurse would scrub for the surgery. You have the anesthetic nurse assisting the anesthetist, and then you had a position called flow and circulating nurse. Now, my spell in the theater, I covered flow and circulating nurse. It was at the bottom of the ladder, but it was a very serious position. It was the unsterile person in the theater who had to monitor everything that was going on and respond to the needs of the others even without them requesting. So if the forceps fell, you whisked it away fast. And you made sure that the surgeon got a new one. Well, he had plenty on the trolley too. And you moved very fast. One of the jobs was to wipe down the bed after each patient had surgery and change the sheet very, very fast. And I would remember that I was doing it as quick as possible, and Mr. Cyrus is there. What is going on in this operating theater? I don't understand what is taking place. Everything is different now. You understand? How long are you going to take to wipe that bed? And I am just calmly doing what I'm supposed to do because that's what I was told to do. I'm going to be here all night. When is the surgery going to be finished? You know, all of a sudden we're doing so much different things. Sister, come back here. She's building a house and putting in windows and doors without walls. I particularly remember those words. And nobody would say anything. And the surgery would go on and on and on. Because in those days, Mr. Cyrus did an outpatient surgery in which he performed sometimes 35 surgeries. It went from 7 a.m. until all 9 o'clock in the night. Nurses were allowed to go off duty when it was their off duty time, but hardly anybody left theater. We were fed and surgery started up again. And it ended when all the patients had their surgeries. Now, after all that carrying on in theater, the end of the surgery, Mr. Cyrus asked, "Where's the little nurse?" And I went. And he said to me, "Listen to me. You have done very well. And don't bother with all I said there, you know. Sister Pauline Charles is an excellent theater nurse. And you all need to listen to everything she teaches you." And I just looked at him and smiled. Because he would do those kind of things. He would pass us the forceps while he's doing surgery and kind of dare you to take it because you can't touch it. It's sterile. He's doing surgery. But he would do those kinds of things to make sure you understood what theater was about. And so the experience was a wonderful one and allowed me to be able to scrub for several surgery until sometimes I used to say, "What happened?" Especially when I'm on night duty and emergencies come in. I'll be called from whichever ward I was on to come and scrub for the minor surgeries. I didn't do major surgeries. They called in the person on call for the major surgeries. He, in the 3rd year, he taught us. As 3rd-year students, usually the doctors would come to the classroom to teach, but Mr. Cyrus taught on the wards. So we would go to the ward area, female surgical or male surgical, wherever he was, a group of us, and he would go from bedside to bedside. And that's where we learned about the different conditions, whatever the patient suffered with. He did a little teaching on that and how to manage it and what he expected of us. And with regards to the standards, we saw where whatever he wanted, he gave us instructions before. He gave the nursing staff instructions. So you're always clear on what Mr. Cyrus wants. And sometimes doctors want different things for the same type of surgery. Then if he gave an order, if he ordered requests, lab requests, x-rays, whatever, today, when he came tomorrow, he expected them to be in the patient's case note. If they were not there, then you would hear Mr. Cyrus' mouth, and I think that's what people feared. So invariably, they were in the case notes. He would teach junior doctors, nurses. He would question us. Sometimes we didn't know the answer, so we kept silent and we think. And then one time we remember him saying to us, "Well, I asked you a question, answer up immediately. Even if you're wrong, maybe I'll think I didn't hear right and I'll think you're right. But don't not say anything." there was a little jovial side to him too, because on night duty sometimes, particularly the last night, we'd cook. Yes, we'd have a cook in the hospital. People would bring stuff, meat, whatever, whatever, and we'd cook. And if Mr. Cyrus came in for surgery and there was a pot on a ward, he found the ward. And he needs to be honored, which he was. And all I can say that now he has gone home, may he rest in peace.
I'm Dr. Twana Brown Caesar, internal medicine and nephrology specialist at the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital and the Modern Medical and Diagnostic Center. It is my pleasure to recount my experiences with Sir Cecil. I believe at this point I could refer to him as a friend. Our first experience dated back when I was in secondary school, when at Alliance Française, or the old public library, there was a display of his clinical work. My father took me to that display and then he said, come and meet someone. And he bought the atlas, the clinical and pathological atlas then. And Dr. Cyrus not only autographed the atlas for me, but he also walked me through some of his surgical specimen. And with great interest, I enjoyed the tour. That, I think, was the beginning of my decision to do medicine. And only in later years I realized it then. I was a science student, maths, physics, chemistry, biology, tending towards physics, math, chemistry. Didn't end up doing biology, but certainly he piqued my interest in medicine. And really, that's probably where medicine won over engineering. In subsequent years, I had all his books autographed, beautiful manifestation of his life. Really a truly humble, talented, smart son of the soil. Dr. Cyrus, as everyone is aware, is responsible for saving single-handedly and managing all surgical cases in St. Vincent and the Grenadines throughout periods of his life. Many persons owe their life to him. In later years, he became quite fond of writing, and anyone who had conversation with him knew he loved his gardening and his meticulous lawns and his fruits and really healthy and clean eating. And that was something I really loved. His interaction with the children. I have fond memories of him guiding my own children through his museum, telling them about operations performed in the past, some in disbelief as to whether one man could have so many surgical skills, operate on gynecological as well as surgical pathology, and also help with eye diseases. His writings in later years really captured my attention. Just how meticulously he documented the course of his career, his loves, his interests as well. Truly a family man. When we see his Dr. Grandad and the pictures that he charted of his own children that he took care of, it was really a pleasure getting to know this humble son of the soil whose contribution to surgery in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is to this day unmatched. He was my friend, he was my mentor, and it is indeed a loss to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and also personally to me. I pray that any person wanting to pursue surgery as a specialty, that they read his work, have an idea of his life journey and his career in medicine, fruitful, successful, rewarding, satisfying and attempt to emulate him and his dedication towards the field of medicine in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is truly unmatched. To his family, Lady Catherine, to his children, grandchildren, I extend sincere condolences, and also to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because this is also our loss. May he rest in peace.
This tribute for Sir Cecil Cyrus has been sponsored by New Haven Funeral Home.
A funeral service should be one that you can be proud of, one that leaves lasting memories of your loved ones. And that's where you need the New Haven Funeral Home. When you walk through our doors, our work begins. From corsages to flowers to guest books, whatever you need to make that funeral a memorable one. We are proud of the quality and class we have brought to the industry. We are proud for having trained the very first certified embalmers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are proud of leading the way in terms of live streaming of funerals online so that your family members overseas could also be part of the celebration of life. We are constantly improving our services. We are driven by customer satisfaction, and we are proud of all that we do.
New Haven Funeral Home, helping families preserve memories.
I'm Mark, son of Dr. Cyrus, the youngest of 4 children, and Dr. Cyrus, Sir Cecil Cyrus, that's my dad, and someone who I'm very proud of calling such. He's had a massive impact on my life, my family's life, and a lot of lives in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, not only as a doctor, but just a good humanitarian. And I'm very proud of everything he's achieved. He was a very hard-working person. When I say hard-working, it's not just in his field of medicine, but also in general life. He will be known for never leaving a task unfinished. You know, from after coming from the operating theater, he would love to go into the garden, and he would work hard at that. He would love to go play squash when he was younger, and he would work hard at that. And he was definitely somebody who impacted everyone who was around him. A very well-educated person, a person who, for many years, worked in the general hospital and was the main surgeon at that time, and so affected a lot of lives through surgery and his medical practice. And then later on, as everyone knows, he had his own hospital, private hospital, and continued that work for many, many years. And in those years, he was, not so much around. You'll hear every Sunday we would be together. That's one thing he would do. But during the day, he would be working. At night, he'd be working when I was younger. And it's something we look back on now, and we understand what he was doing and the drive that he had and the passion he had for his patients and for general life as a whole. He was a funny person too. He had a very dry sense of humor. As I would say, after work, he had his pastimes in squash and gardening, and of course, he loved to entertain and be entertained. We grew up in a life where every weekend we'd be at a different person's house, and there's always a nice little party going on, and my father enjoyed himself. He did quite a fantastic innings at 94 years of age, something we all aspire to. But he was, I think, attained that age through good health and good practice of health as well. Good diet. He used to exercise a lot, as I said, with squash. He used to walk and work hard in the garden every weekend and sweat away. And we all aspire to be as healthy as that. And they're big shoes to fill, which I don't think any of us siblings expect to fill, but we're just proud that we are sons and daughters of Dr. Cyrus. Thank you.
So my name's Helen Cyrus. I'm the eldest of the family for the children. And just saying a few words about my dad. So he was a hero to everybody, but he was dad to us. And the thing that made him special was that he was very protective of us as his children. Obviously, when we were growing up as teenagers, we didn't like that. But he understood the bigger and wider context of what being a parent was. And, you know, growing up, we always were saying, well, I'm never going to do that when I become a parent. And then very much you find that some of the things that your parents tell you, you start adopting some of the same principles as well. So he was very caring and very protective, as I said. He was very driven. And he was somebody who used his obstacles for opportunities. So we saw this, what I call a stalwart trooper. You know, he pushed through the barriers. From being a little boy, you know, he had lots of disadvantages, but he worked those with his parents to his advantage and worked hard. And I think he gave us some really good examples of using obstacles as opportunities, recognizing that, you know, no doesn't mean that the door is closed, that you can find different ways to do things. But if you have a dream and if you have a goal, that was the most important thing. And then it was about how you navigate that to get to the outcome that you want. So he was somebody who had a sense of occasion. He loved to put on you know, loved parties, he loved dancing, everything that he ever did, whenever we had anything here, because he loved his garden and he loved his plants and, you know, just nature. He would go all out to sort of decorate and make an occasion. And I think when he came to England, which is where I live, I really understood how I had taken up that baton, because I had a little function for them, and you know, they were talking about, let's go and buy some plants with flowers on and let's decorate outside. And I suddenly had one of those moments when I recognized that this is where I got it from, because you know, they had instilled that in us. So he will be sadly missed. I mean, one of the things that it was something that we did together on the first day that I arrived back. We would always go down the garden together and he would show off his plants and his vegetables, and you know, we would talk about what he'd grown. And so the last time that I came, he didn't do that, and it was the first time ever in my lifetime of being away for 40 years that we hadn't done that together. But I was so determined that I wanted him to see his garden that I persuaded him on a few occasions to go down. He actually insisted on walking down, which he did amazingly, even though he had the option of going in a wheelchair. But that just showed you the strength and determination that he had, and he's always had. And he walked down with his walker and assisted. And the last time, just a week before I left, I said to him, Dad, you know, let's go down again. But this time, how about going in the wheelchair? And so he accepted it, even though he was, you know, he sort of didn't want to in the beginning. But we managed to get him up to see his vegetables, and he walked up with the help of his two faithful gardeners. And he was so delighted because we got to show him everything that was down at the bottom of the garden. And he came over and he hugged me, and he said, he called me over and said, come here, let me hug you. He said, thank you for bullying me. I said, I didn't bully you, but I did strongly encourage you to do it, because I knew what it would mean to him. And he just really enjoyed it. And that was the very last time that he went down his garden. So I was so glad that we managed to do that. So those are the things that were important to him: his family, his garden. And, you know, St. Vincent has offered him so much in terms of the wealth of experience that he had for his work. I don't know if he would have had that variety of patient that he looked after, and he loved this island. He was determined from the age of 7 to come back here. And I think the thing that I'm the proudest of about him is that he set that goal, he had that vision, and he did it. And he served his country well. He worked really hard, and that was the thing that he demonstrated to us as a family about, hard work brings a profit. You've got to put something in to get something out. It's not just going to drop down from the sky. And so I think that was the benchmark that he set for all of us to recognize that, if you want something, you're going to have to work hard for it, and it doesn't come easy, but it will be worth it in the end. And I'm proud of what he has done. I'm proud of what he's achieved. I'm proud of him as a man, as a father, as a doctor. And it's been very heartwarming to see the outpouring of tributes to him and what he's done. And, hearing the stories, it's, quite amusing, some of the stories that people come and tell you about, but they're from the heart, and it's meant a lot to them. And I want people to know that they meant a lot to him. He was always, we would go walking or we're in the market or somewhere, and somebody would come up to him and say, "Oh, Doc, you remember that you operated on me and such, and you did such and such." And eventually, he would remember, and that always brought a smile to his face, because he had one of those memories. He had a photographic memory. And up to the point that we, just before he passed away, he still had that level of memory where he would remember certain things about people. So, he had a very sharp mind as well as a very strong body. And that was because of all the years of squash. So again, another really good example about keeping fit and keeping fitness as part of your regime, because it just helps your mind as well as your body. And so, yeah, he did well, and he served his country well, and he's left a wonderful legacy in his children and his grandchildren, as well as a legacy that's passed on to St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the wider medical community. So for that, I'm very grateful and thankful.
Tears could build a stairway and memories a lane, we'd walk right up to heaven and bring you back again. It broke our hearts to lose you, but you did not go alone. For part of us went with you the day God called you home. God looked around his garden and he found an empty place. Then he looked down upon the earth and he saw your precious face. He put his arms around you and he lifted you to rest. God's garden must be beautiful. He always takes the best. Yes, he always takes the best. We knew that you were suffering. We knew you were in pain. We knew you'd never get well on this earth again. So he closed your weary eyes and he whispered, "Peace be thine." Then he took you up.
This tribute for Sir Cecil Cyrus has been sponsored by New Haven Funeral Home.
A funeral service should be one that you can be proud of, one that leaves lasting memories of your loved ones. And that's where you need the New Haven Funeral Home. When you walk through our doors, our work begins. From corsages to flowers to guest books, whatever you need to make that funeral a memorable one. We are proud of the quality and class we have brought to the industry. We are proud for having trained the very first certified embalmers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are proud of leading the way in terms of live streaming of funerals online so that your family members overseas could also be part of the celebration of life. We are constantly improving our services. We are driven by customer satisfaction, and we are proud of all that we do.
New Haven Funeral Home, helping families preserve memories.